Yeah, I kind of liked it when we had the plant last time. I mean, the plant is here, it's just like, I don't know how I got it in a frame last time. This time it just works like this. So we'll just stick with that. Yeah, this will just have to do. So today came to my attention that in 3 weeks, it'll be the new year. And now that the year is slowly coming to an end, I've been looking through my bullet journal. I tend to write down if I watched a movie or if I read a good book. I have this section where I write down the stuff I watched and stuff I read. This bit you can ignore, I never ended up using that bit. And also at the end of every month, I have this section where I write down my favorites. Like if you've seen my previous bullet journal setups, I always have this one section where I write my favorites. What I usually do towards the end of the year is I kind of round up and make this yearly favorites thing. And I kind of feel like talking about all the things I thought were awesome this year. Probably nobody knows all the things I wrote down. So it's anyways just me kind of having a monologue. So I thought I might as well share it with you. More kind of like as a recommendation thing, but also just because I want to talk about it. I don't really have anybody I can talk to with about it. That sounds sadder than it is. I hope. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the list of stuff that I watched and stuff that I read and say kind of like what my opinion was on them, like if I liked it, if I didn't, if I can recommend it, if I don't. So starting off with things that I watched is I watched the Long Pond studio sessions, the Taylor Swift Folklore studio sessions. That's just something, I mean, it had to do with Taylor Swift, so I watched it. It's just kind of how things are. I mean, I liked it a lot, but it wasn't like this Oscar-worthy movie kind of thing. It was also more just kind of like to explain the songs and have that raw stripped down version of the songs. But it was good, like, I mean, I enjoyed it. Then I watched Death to 2020. I think there was this Netflix special back when we didn't know that 2021 would be even worse. That one was quite funny because it was very accurate. Like, it was painfully funny. You had to laugh about it because otherwise it would just be sad. But I actually liked that. I think it would be interesting to watch it in 2021 and just like think back at how we had no idea how bad it was actually still going to get. Then I watched Woman in Pieces, which was an absolutely amazing movie. I think the actress won an award for that once. I can totally recommend it. It's about this couple and this birth, and it goes a bit wrong. And then there was this whole legal issue thing with the midwife. I just thought that the actress was really great who played the mother. Something I remember I really loved was the metaphors they did with the apples. I don't know if you're as fascinated with like movies and hidden Easter eggs and metaphors as me, but if you got the apple thing and you watched the movie, let me know, because it's kind of cool detail. They kind of kept sneaking in. That's definitely a movie I can recommend. It's not a comedy. It's like something that prepared to be emotionally shook. You shall be shooketh. Then with my mother and my sister, I watched Bridgerton. I didn't really like it. I mean, I started watching Downton Abbey since, and I prefer Downton Abbey way more. So like if you want to watch something like kind of more period pieced, I can recommend Downton Abbey any day over Bridgerton. I don't know what, I just didn't like it. I think, in my opinion, they almost tried too hard to make a period piece, but that was like cool and different and innovative and kind of like modern, but still period piece, like, if you get what I mean. Like if you watch Bridgerton, you probably hopefully understand what I mean. Maybe you also have a different opinion in it, and if you do, feel free to let me know. I always find it interesting to discuss things, because if I just keep repeating what I already know, it's basically like an echo chamber. A movie I watched was White Tiger. I can really recommend that one too. That one, it's about this guy in India who he compares life to like a chicken coop, and how like you have to fight your way to the top, and you're basically like these two kinds of people, like the ones who make it and the ones who don't. It was just a very interesting movie about kind of like the hierarchy of like money and power and that kind of culture. I think it was in Mumbai. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting. It kind of gave me a little bit Slumdog Millionaire vibes. So if you like that, you probably like White Tiger too. I think it's actually based on a book, and maybe even like on kind of a true story, but I don't know. So don't quote me on any of this. Don't quote me on anything, just like as general advice. Then something I started in 2020 but finished in 2021 was watching The Good Place, which is one of my all-time favorite series. Like, hands down. I mean, Michael Schur, I always like him and all the things he does. I also really like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but The Good Place just was, for me, one level up, where Brooklyn Nine-Nine is very funny. But I think what I liked about The Good Place is it's very funny, but also very smart, where in every episode they kind of hide a moral lesson. Behind all of the humor, there's a really kind of deep meaning. It's just done really smart. If you don't know what The Good Place is, it's basically about when you die, you go either to the good or the bad place, depending on how you were when you were alive. And it's this group of people who feel like they're not actually that good people, but somehow they ended up in the good place. It's kind of about like how they learn to be better people, and a lot of little stories along the way, but I don't want to give away any spoilers in case some of you haven't watched it yet, in which case I can recommend it. And it's only 4 seasons, which I think is actually quite decent, because I think often series that are really good miss the point when they should stop. But I think like The Good Place really managed the right time. They ended on a high rather than like using the high until it kind of like faded away, and then thought, oh, let's just stop. Then I watched the first season of Firefly Lane. I don't feel like I want to talk too much on it, because while I like the first season, I feel like there's still more to come. So I'm maybe still going to like wait until the second season comes out, then give you my actual recommendation. Then I watched The Octopus Teacher. I mean, I'm studying biology now, and I just really thought it was cool, like learning the things about the octopus and all that. And I think it actually even won an Oscar. I mean, I heard rumors that in the end, like, it was also quite staged, and it wasn't actually always the same octopus, which would kind of like ruin the magic of the movie. But as a movie in itself, I really liked it. It's about this guy who follows this octopus and learns things about how awesome octopus are. They are quite awesome. So, I mean, I enjoyed watching it. Then I watched Behind Her Eyes, which is kind of this short series on this weird relationship between psychiatrist, his wife, and his secretary. It's this weird kind of interwoven thing, and something meta comes into it with like auras and changing personality, and lucid dreaming plays a big part in it. I don't quite know how to explain it, but while I really liked it and I thought it was super interesting, super gripping during it, I didn't really like the ending. It was too open-ended for me. While I usually appreciate a kind of open end, that one was too open-ended for me, so I don't know. Then I watched a documentary called The Creative Brain, and basically how you can train creativity and how to find creativity in different places, which was also interesting. Like, some of the things on this list isn't necessarily things I was like super highlighted about, but it's just things I watched and I liked. I hope you can kind of, out of my tone, read out which ones I really liked and which ones are okay and like are a good watch, but like not highlight, and which ones aren't that great in my opinion. Like Moxie, which was this movie I watched. It's about like this group of teenagers in high school who tried to make this feminist movement. And in my opinion, that movie was also a bit too try hard. Then I watched A Life on Our Planet, which is a documentary. This one was narrated by David Attenborough. Subjectively seen, it was a great movie. Then I watched Das Perfekte Geheimnis, which is a German comedy. It was also pretty funny. I don't know if any of you watch German movies, but I mean, it was funny. It was just this comedy. It wasn't bad. It wasn't really great. It was average Saturday night comedy. Then I watched Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat with Samin Nosrat, because my sister has the book of hers, and I thought it was really interesting. It's this 4-part series, and in each episode, it's about one of the components. Sorry, my hand is just like creepily like sneaking up the wall here, like a spider. But yeah, I can recommend it. I thought it was really interesting also to learn like a bit about the science behind like those components and so. And I just think she's a really charismatic person. I can recommend it. Like, I don't really watch cooking shows or stuff like that. If I was to watch one, I think I can recommend that one, because it's not like just about the cooking, but it's like also about the culture and the feeling and like the family vibe. And then I watched 3096 Tage, which is this movie based on Natasha Kampusch. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's this girl who was abducted when she was like 10 years old, and she lived for like 11 years in captivity, and then she managed to escape. And it's basically a movie adapted to the book that she wrote about her life, and it was quite impressive. It was probably one of the most emotional movies I watched in 2021. Like, I remember after the movie I was just sitting there and I needed like 5 minutes until I could like stand up. It was quite heavy. I feel like sometimes we forget about that these things do happen, and they do happen more often than than we think. And I think it's just sometimes also important to remind yourself that this does still exist and that it's not just something that we should ignore and say, well, those few people. Yeah, I thought it was a very impactful movie. Then I watched Soul, and my god, okay, this is now a bit quite an opposite shift to the one before, but Soul, that movie was amazing. Like, if I regardless what age you are, it's one of the best, like, animated movies ever, in my opinion. Like, it's amazing. If I remember correctly, it's about spirits and how before they're born, they're kind of, like, being formed with their passions and, like, their talents and all of that. And it's about this one guy who accidentally ends up there, who's actually already been alive. And then there's this soul who doesn't have any passions, who doesn't really have anything it likes, and they kind of work together, and I'm really bad at making summaries. If you trust my opinion, which I don't know why you should, but I mean, I can just recommend that movie for anybody, really. Unless you, like, don't like good movies. I don't see why you shouldn't watch that movie. Like, I cried at the end, and I rarely cry at movies, ever, but there I cried in the end, and it was just so nice. Then I watched Yes Day, which is also more like one of those Saturday night comedies. It wasn't bad, it wasn't super great. Then something I started in 2020 but finished in 2021 was Avatar: The Last Airbender. I remember kind of watching that in my childhood, but because I couldn't read time when I was that age yet, and it just came on the TV at like random times, and I couldn't watch it chronologically, I started watching it chronologically with my brother, and we just finished it, and that was like amazing. I think sometimes, same as with Soul, because it's like marketed towards children, one underrates values that it contains morally and the genius that is behind it, and the humor and just like the amazingness. And with Avatar, that was like, I really felt this gaping hole after having finished watching Avatar for at least a month. I craved watching another episode of Avatar, but it was like done, and I felt empty and sad. But I'm fine now. Then I watched Derry Girls, which was, I think, 2 seasons long. It's about this, like, kind of conservative Irish girls' school with, well, there's one guy in it because he doesn't count as a guy because he's English. I just think it's a very funny comedy show, and I hope they bring out a season 3 because I actually really, really enjoyed it. It's this weird type of funny, but I liked it. Then I watched Woman in the Window, which is based on a book, I think, which is about this woman, and I think she kind of has agoraphobia, so she's afraid to go outside, so she lives in her home, and she kind of goes insane, and it's kind of, I think, a thriller-like movie about where she starts seeing things outside of her window, and like crimes and murders live out of her perspective, so you're also kind of confused, like, what happens, what doesn't. I mean, it was a very gripping movie, but I have to be honest, I didn't quite get the movie. Like, I didn't quite understand. Also, the ending left me a bit confused. But, I mean, if you watched it and you understood it, feel free to let me kind of know what the synopsis was in the end, what the ending meant. Then I watched Becoming because I listened to the audiobook from Michelle Obama, and then I also watched just the accompanying Netflix special, which, I mean, if you read the book, I think it's a good watch, but it's like also it's a bit repetitive to what is in the book itself, so I think you can also like watch either or and you'd be fine. Then I watched Schitt's Creek, which I mean is amazing. I don't think, like, if you're familiar with it, you don't need me to tell you that. It's also one of those shows where it's like super funny but also super meaningful in how I love, same as in The Good Place, how they manage to be funny and still develop character building throughout the seasons. And it's one of those shows you don't necessarily are hooked on the first episode, but that's because it's realistic and it doesn't like rely on your quick humor, fast laugh response, but more on this building character and like passion, but also really funny, and it's just amazing, and I can recommend it, and if you haven't watched it, you should watch it if you like to laugh. Then I watched The Courier in the cinemas with one of my friends. He's this English messenger between America and the Soviet Union. This tense kind of messaging thing where you could be called at any moment. It was very nerve-wracking. Like, I actually really like that movie. It's very tense, like where every single minute you're like, is he going to get caught? I really like that one. I mean, I can recommend it if you're like for a really intense, on your toes kind of movies. Then I watched Life in Color, which is also this David Attenborough narrated series with I think 4 parts or 3 parts, where it's basically about how in the animal kingdom colors play different role. So if you're also again interested in like kind of like this nature sciences thing like me, it's a great watch. Like, Really good. Then I watched Coded Bias, which was this documentary about how with the modern world and all of this facial recognition and the bias between races and genders. And I just thought it was really interesting because I'm not really familiar with the world, or I wasn't. Well, I'm still not really well versed. I just thought it was interesting to learn about that because I hadn't really known anything about that previously. I should also mention that besides the things that I wrote down here, I also watched the odd documentary here and there. Nothing super mention worthy. Then I also watched Human Nature, which was also kind of like this docu-series that I also like, kind of like sciences, biology, interesting. Then The Chair, which was this fun one-seasoned kind of short series thing, which I always appreciate those because it's like not as much of an investment, but it's so fun. It's about this single mother. I think she's the head of the English literature board of this university and kind of her life. It's a fun watch for a one-season special kind of thing. Then I watched Inside from Bo Burnham, which was like just a masterpiece in my opinion. I thought it was perfect. I thought the songs were so spot on because it's so funny, but it's funny because it's so true. And also again, one of those kind of things where it's kind of like almost sad that it's so true. So you have to kind of laugh because otherwise it would just be sad. And also, I mean, it was just pure entertainment. And it's different than any other like movie special I've seen. I can recommend it. Like if you're interested to see something different than you're probably used to watching, I can recommend it. Then I watched 9 Perfect Strangers, which is also this like kind of short series thing, which is about this group of people and they go to this retreat and then they're all somehow on magic mushrooms and things go kind of out of hand, and that was super interesting. I didn't quite get the ending. I was confused somewhere along the way. I thought it was kind of funny like how I and nobody in the show kind of knew what was going on, but it was still kind of interesting. You wanted to find out. It had a bit of a weird ending in my opinion. I didn't quite get the high point that this thing it built up to. A bit like in Behind Her Eyes, where I really liked the series and the build up, but I was kind of like confused a bit at the ending or at like the highlight. Then I watched Unnatural Selection, which is about this genetic mutation and kind of like changing your genes with like CRISPR also plays a part in it. Then I watched Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, and that was also quite breathtaking. I don't want to compare it to the Natasha Kampusch movie because it's a completely different topic, but in my opinion it's the same intense feeling in taking these very real life situations, but like this amazing story that turned out of it. Impressionate and heavy, but also inspiring, if that makes sense. I hope you kind of get what I mean. I'm not going to tell you what it's about. If I tell you what it's about, title gives it away too quickly. Like I think if you watch the trailer, well, you might get it from the trailer. If you're interested in such a movie, I can just recommend watch a trailer, and if that's interesting, you'll love the movie. Then at the Zurich Film Festival, I watched Boiling Point. It's about this one evening in a restaurant, and from like the different perspectives, it's like this one shot kind of thing. And because it's in a restaurant, you like have that intensity of a restaurant. Everybody has this stressful life and hectic and how everybody gets to their boiling point. I thought it was really good. I think it was, if you once worked maybe in that kind of field, it can be very relatable. It was made perfectly because in one evening of that restaurant, they condensed so many different like cultural and business aspects, like just the different aspects that go into like a restaurant and that kind of gastronomy culture. Then I watched The Power of the Dog. I mean, it was good, but I also didn't quite get it. It was also one of those movies where like I enjoyed it visually, but I didn't quite understand it. If you watched it and you totally understood it, feel free to let me know what it meant. And then the last movie I watched was the James Bond, the new one. I mean, it's James Bond. It was pure entertainment. For maybe just like 2.5 hours, you just kind of like have to put all your feminist morals just aside for like you can be feminist all your life, but like for those 2.5 hours maybe just have to put it aside and just enjoy the entertainment. Of course you can afterwards dissect it. I sometimes feel like in order to just like enjoy the movie, just like put off that role for a second. I mean, considering it's a James Bond movie, I think it was quite okay in the sexism area. I thought it was entertaining and I really enjoyed it. I plan on talking about all of the other things as well in this video, like the stuff I read and general favorites. That's not going to happen. This video is way too long already. If you liked this, I can do it with what I read and the general favorites. But this, as it is too long. So I'm not going to drag it out any further, and I'm saying goodbye and good night because it's late. See you next time. Bye!